As we saw there, the jobless rate jumped up today. The opposition have been quick to blame the higher unemployment on the eligibility criteria for the government's JobKeeper scheme.
Too many Australians lost their job in April because of a deliberate decision by the government. The unemployment queues are longer than they need to be because too many Australian workers have been excluded from the government's JobKeeper program. Unemployment will be higher for longer because the government is bungling the implementation of the wage subsidies.
Joining me now is my panel, Sky News host of Across Australia, Peta Credlin in Brisbane, and Sky News host and 2GB radio broadcaster, Chris Smith in Sydney. Look, it was always going to be a terrible set of numbers. As I said, I don't blame the PM. He was forced to make a decision to save lives. I get all of that. But what really struck me is how many of the unemployed are potentially inside those JobKeeper numbers. So we really won't see the true state of employment in this country and unemployment, I think, till we see the JobKeeper come to an end after 6 months or so. Chris, that's my worry.
Yeah, I don't know how you reacted when you started to see the first number and you thought to yourself, well, hang on, this isn't as bad as what we first thought. But then you started to add it all together. The participation rate now has fallen just straight through the floor. And if you add the 5.5 million odd on JobKeeper, if you throw in the million, about a little bit less than that, on JobSeeker, and you throw in the million that are sort of no longer participating in the workforce, you add all of those together, you're over 7 million Australians. And when that comes and hits you in the face like it did me this afternoon, it becomes very sobering. It really makes me think about the hurt that Australians are feeling right now, tonight.
I mean, Gleeso, to even get JobKeeper, you've got to have a downturn in your revenues of about 30%, I think, is for the entry payment, and 50% if you're a larger entity. Now, to do that, you're saying you're doing it tough. To keep those people on through and beyond this 6-month period when the government's paid them the wages, wait till you open the doors again, you have to pay their wages. If you've had that sort of 30% hit, if you don't immediately recover, the likelihood, even though the government's kept your staff with you for 6 months, the likelihood that you can then pick up those wages and take them beyond is going to be a real challenge. So it's how quickly we get back to a strong enough economy that those people can transfer from the taxpayer JobKeeper to the business paying its own way again. That's the real challenge. And Chris is right. Right now, we're talking about half the Australian workforce.
Chris is 100% right. It's sobering. It's incredibly challenging for the country. And I think what it represents for us is the challenge attached to actually going forward now. And I think it provides us with the opportunity to reset the way we do business in this country. It's now up to the business leaders and business people to grab the bit and run hard and reform the way they do their jobs, reform the way they run their businesses. And for example, Peter, I think that local government and state government, and I heard your opener and you're absolutely right, they have to now unshackle. They have to get rid of the red and green tape. If there's a project ready to go and a developer is ready to fund that particular project, let it go, create the jobs, let the conservation and environmental sort of regulations that are required, make sure that they're complied with, but let them go now so that we can actually get on with the job of creating jobs. This old paradigm of keeping, big projects caught up in bureaucracy for years and years on end has to end.
Yeah, of course, the states are only going to move if they get pressure in the media, if business grow a backbone and put the states under some pressure and local government under some pressure, and we haven't seen that unless it's issues like climate change, and voters put the states under some pressure. I mean, in all of this, the heavy lifting, Chris, is done by the private economy. I mean, today in New South Wales, it's been revealed, tipped off by the Premier, and it's all gone through the Remuneration Tribunal, and they'll all say it's hands off from us. But basically, anyone who's in the parliamentary area or in the public service realm, departmental heads, they've all had these massive increases to their salary at a time when we've just said all of these Australians in the real economy are out of work. Now, the base salary for many of these heads of department is $599,000. Let's call it $600,000. Not a good look at any time, but it's an absolute shocker now.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you raised this today because this didn't get the coverage it deserved. totally out of whack. Like we say that quite often, oh, they're out of touch with reality. But the reality is that we're on the cusp of a depression in this country. That's the fact. And yet these fat cats, who, by the way, are being paid, if you start doing some number crunching on similar public servants in similar rank in the United Kingdom, they are being paid so much more than their United Kingdom counterparts. So that's the first thing that says that they don't deserve extra money. But secondly, we're on the brink of a depression. Has someone been asleep at the wheel and haven't looked outside? The place is absolute ruin at the moment. And how dare this occur? The other thing is that I think there is a precedent where a Premier can stand in the way or delay those increases. I'm not sure about...
Yeah, they can ask for them to be put off. They certainly can at a Commonwealth level.
So they, at the Commonwealth level, right. It would be good if they could do that in New South Wales as well.
I'm sure they can. Let's see if they do it. Let's see if they do it. I've got to ask you, Gleeso, all the talk today about Queensland, you know, with a budget deficit of $90 billion and rising, a treasurer who's not doing a day job, or former treasurer, instead filling in the appointment of principals in schools in her area. They now want to run an airline. Now, Peter Dutton says, oh, this is laughable. Listen, I'll play what he said exactly. Let's have a listen.
She's putting Queensland on a path to economic disaster. And every credit card that Anastasia Palaszczuk has as the Queensland Premier is maxed out. She doesn't have a dollar left. And yet she's talking about going out spending billions of dollars she doesn't have on an airline that has no money coming in, that has billions of dollars worth of debt.
Didn't miss
Gleeso.
He didn't miss it, did he? And he's right. And he also referred to the Queensland government as corrupt and chaotic. I find it extraordinary. And let's face it, today the jobless figures showed there are 130,000 Queenslanders that have lost their jobs in the last month as a result of this pandemic and other associated factors. Virgin, at the very best case scenario, she'll save 5,000 jobs. It's a distraction from the scandal-ridden way in which this government has been operating in this state. I think it's extraordinary that they would try and intervene and somehow try and buy 15% of an airline, as Peter Dutton said, that is on the bones of its bum. I mean, I can understand why Virgin is important to Queensland because it services all those regional routes, which is important for tourism. But there's no way that this government should be investing in an airline when they're putting on all these extra publics. That's the issue. Sack 25,000 public servants if you want to save some dough.
Yeah, I tell you what, and also I've got to go back to this issue. We talked about it last night. I've seen no movement from the government yet, but Chris, federal court in an NDIS case that was taken to court, the NDIS said, no, we're not going to pay for your prostitutes out of your NDIS payment, taxpayer-funded NDIS payment. The federal court said, well, no, we think it's a fair and reasonable thing, and it can be periodic. It can be every month or so. Someone knocks on your door to do the business, and we're paying for it. Now, Gleeso was talking before. I could be a lot more colourful, but I won't at this early hour. I mean, Gleeso was saying just a moment ago, you know, we've got to change the way we do business. Surely things like the add-ons in the NDIS have got to be reined back.
The add-ons have to be reined back, but here is a government policy that is in the hands of a federal court. What a silly jurisdiction to have a decision about whether prostitutes can service NDIS, you know, the disabled. It is gross, and the disabled know that. You know, when I raised this about 12 months ago on radio, the only people that rang up were sex workers who were outraged that I would try and get in the way of her clientele or their clientele. And they're the only ones that ring up. You don't get disabled people saying, oh, this is something that we should all have to relieve our health problems, etc., or whatever dumb excuse that they use. Sorry, the federal court's way out of its depth and probably way out of its jurisdiction. It's unreal.
Yeah, look, I've no issue with them doing the business, but I just don't want to pay for it as a taxpayer. I'd rather have someone come in and wash them and feed them and do all the other things that we expect in a civilised society we do for people with a disability. But draw a line there. Absolutely draw a line. Gentlemen, there you go. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Peter.